Well, good morning, everybody. Um, Welcome to God Stories number 8, I believe. So we're going to get started. It's 8 o'clock a.m., and I'm sure some of these guys will get on in just a minute. But I want to read a scripture for this story because this story concerns a time when the Lord was showing me how to recognize love. Because if you start recognizing love and recognizing somebody else's love, you'll find love come out of you as well. So I just want to read it before we get started, and it's in 1 Corinthians 13. It says, I'll just start in the 4th verse. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy, and love does not parade itself, and it's not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, it is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. And when I was going through this thing, I got my, come on, Allie. We've got Allie here. She always wants to get up in my lap. You say good morning? Good morning. But one thing I've learned about love, if you've ever been in love, you can endure the person with their flaws because you love them, and it's really not hard. It just comes natural because you're more in love with them and you're more focused on your love than the flaws. And you find yourself not behaving rudely, and you bear a lot of things with them because you love them. Love always, at times even brings hope for that person that you love. And that's kind of one of the things that the Lord showed me in this story. And some of you probably out there have heard this story, but it's one of our favorites. It's a little bit strange, but it's a good one. Of course, all these have been kind of strange if you've been tuning in on God's stories. But there was a time where I got invited to go hunting, and never been hunting at this place. And it was a kind of a club type hunting place. And when I drove up along with my friend, I got out of the car, and all these other rednecks were standing around. It's dark, real early in the morning, smoking, cigarettes, talking, and, grumbling, complaining, you name it. If you've ever been at a deer camp, it's doesn't seem too healthy in the air. But for a man, sometimes a redneck is good. But anyway, I got out of the truck and I started to walk into the crowd that was standing around, and the head guy turned around and looked at me and looked at my friend that brought me, and he says, why in the blankety blank did you bring him here? And of course he was cussing up a storm. I won't say exactly what he was saying. I'll use blankety blank. And my friend said, oh, it's okay. He's a good hunter. I thought I'd bring him and see if we can put him on some deer. And he looked at me and he goes, can you even blankety blank hunt? And I said, yeah, I can hunt. And I started laughing just for a moment and smiling because I could see love coming out of this guy, even though he had this, frown on his face and looking at me and cussing up a storm. He said, we'll see about that if you can hunt. And so he started telling everybody to go, what spot they're pointed to. And of course, everybody was a little bit quiet, but when he started picking on me, and I just kept smiling, at him as he was talking and ranting and raving. And he turned around and he goes, why are you smiling? You get that smile off your face. And I shook my head. I said, I don't know. I'm just smiling, man. I'm just glad to be here. And he just shook his head. And when he shook his head and he turned around and he went to go get in his truck, he goes, you're going with me. And of course, I could feel all the other rednecks saying, oh, Lord, here he goes. He's going to let him have it. And so my friend took off to his deer stand, and I was going to have to ride with him, and he was going to take me to a deer stand that he knew. And we had to get in this real small Toyota truck, and you can imagine it's just for two people. And it was like sitting beside each other on an airplane. We were, two big guys, and he's just letting me have it. He said, I'm going to take you out here to this stand, and there's going to be an 8-point buck that's going to come out on the right-hand side. And when he comes out, I want you to shoot him. Now, if you miss him, you might as well just stay up there, because I'm going to come up there after you shoot him, after you miss him, and I'm going to kick your blankety blank. Do you understand me? And I just smiled, and I said, yeah, I understand. And he said, and get that blankety blank smile off your face. And I couldn't get that smile off my face, because somehow I knew that he was loving me. And I don't know if you've ever met people like that, but ever since then, there's a lot of people that talk like that. You may be offended in your mind, but you'll find out sometimes that's the only way that they can love. So I get up, of course, and he said, now don't get out of that stand until I come and pick you up. And he said, if you get down off that stand, I see you down off that stand, when I come, I'm going to kick your blankety blank. Do you understand me, boy? And I just smiled. I said, yeah. And he said, and get that blankety blank smile off your face. And I was like, okay. And so he took off, and sure enough, probably about 2 hours, the 8-point buck comes out, and he turns and starts walking away from me, and I get a little bit nervous, and because I know that him walking away from me is not going to be a good shot. And of course I shoot anyway, like an idiot, and I missed him. And sure enough, I'm waiting there till dark, and here comes the guy that has the land, and he steps out of his truck. He goes, well, did you get him? I said, well, he said, you missed this blankety blank. And I said, yeah, actually, and I started to try to explain. He said, don't even explain it, you sorry blankety blank. Get in the truck. That deer's never going to come back. I'll tell you what, they shouldn't have never brought you out here blankety blank. And I was still smiling while I was in the truck, and he said, now get that smile off your face. And man, I just kept smiling. And he cussed me all the way back to the camp, and it was lunchtime, and of course we get out and everybody's standing around, and he just lets me have it in front of everybody. And I'm still smiling at him, and he's telling me to get the smile off my face, and of course everybody, is a little bit embarrassed for me. I'm really not that embarrassed, because I can just feel something coming out of him that's actually good. But he just keeps telling me to, not smile and get that blankety blank look off my face. So, long story short, everybody gets in their truck and they're leaving. Most everybody got their deer. I'm about to leave, and he said, hey, Brad. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you be back here at 2 o'clock. I said, what for? He said, because I'm going to take you to a place that's got a deer. You hadn't killed a deer. You can't shoot where the blankety blank, so I'm going to put you on another stand, you blankety blank. So I thought, okay. And so I went to Bojangles, got something to eat, and I came back, and sure enough, he's waiting. We go to this swamp, and we get out of his truck and walk back there to the back of the woods, and he's even whispering, and when he whispered, he was even cussing in his whispering. He goes, and when we get to the stand, he said, now you get up in that stand. He said, and you be quiet. You hear? You saw it blankety blank. And he said, there's going to be another 8-point buck that's going to come up through here. It's going to stand right here on this dry piece. And he said, I want you to shoot that blankety blank. And he said, if you miss that blankety blank, I'm just going to kill you. And so I got up there, and he was whispering when I got up there. He goes, now listen, I've got to go to church. I'm a deacon at the church. And he said, you just text me when you shoot him, and I'll come get you. And I said, okay. And I'm smiling, and he looked at me as I was smiling, just shook his head again. And so he went to church as a deacon, and and so I'm waiting there, and it's getting dark, and sure enough, here comes this big old buck, and I shoot him, and I finally got him, and so I texted him, and I knew it was still church time, and so I texted him. I said, I got him. And he texted me back while he was at church. He said, you keep your blankety blank up in that stand till I get there. And so I was just sitting there laughing as he was texting me, And I'm surprised he didn't say, get that blankety blanky smile off your face with the text. But as many times I smiled, he had to know I was smiling. And so I can hear him coming through the woods. And he's standing there, and I'm waiting on him to get there, and he looks up at me. He said, well, get your blankety blank off that stand. And we walked over there, and sure enough, the buck's there, and he looks at me, and he goes, well, I'm not going to carry him out. He said, you're carrying him out. He made me drag that deer probably 500 yards, big old buck, through this swamp. And as we're dragging him, he's criticizing me. Look at you can't even carry this thing, blankety blank. And I'm just smiling. Of course, back then, it's dark and the big moon's out. We get to his truck, and of course, I'm going to need some help putting it in. And we start to lift it, and we put it in the truck, and all of a sudden, he just stops. And I can't see his total face, and he's just sitting there. And so I look, and I see the reflection of the moon off of his face, and I see these tears coming down. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, he's either having a heart attack or something. And I said, you okay? And he looked at me, and the moon shined in his face, and he had tears running all down his face. I said, you all right? And he looked at me, and he said, you're the only one that's ever been able to recognize how I love people. And I just lost it. I started crying because it was, I guess, through the whole time when I was smiling and loving him, it was pulling out more love in him. And it was just crushing him, in his heart, in his own heart. And he stood there, and I said, what do you mean? He said, I know I'm a little bit rough. He said, but if I'm not cussing you and giving you a hard time, I'm not really loving you. And I said, I totally understand. He goes, well, how do you understand that? He said, I was abused. I grew up in a hard, family, a hard time. And this is all I've known. But when you stepped out of that truck, he said, there was just something about you that I really liked. I said, well, honestly, I probably wouldn't have recognized how you was loving me if it wasn't for Jesus. Because I used to be kind of the same way, real rough and mean at times, or tough. And sometimes if I was tough on you, I was loving you. And he just hugged me. We just hugged each other there in the moonlight. And then he pulled me away from him. He said, now, don't you tell anybody about this. He said, because I got a good reputation around here. And from then on, we were really close friends. But I can tell you what I've learned from that thing. By the way, he put me on his best stand. He'd been watching this deer for a year, and he gave me his best. And I look back now, and if the Lord hadn't have dealt with me or talked to me of how to recognize people's love instead of their flaws, I probably would have been offended and gotten back in my truck when this guy started, cursing me and trying to embarrass me in front of everybody, and he let me have it on the way to the stand. I probably would have just told him to turn it around. But I look back, Of course, being older now and being able to learn some of this stuff, I'm still learning it now. I look back and I see how the Lord treated me. He was always loving me, just as I was loving this guy supernaturally. Of course, I was learning how to love. We all learn how to love. You can't just learn love instantly unless it's just supernatural, which is very rare. The Bible says we learn how to love and we grow in love. But I look back and I see how Jesus treated me when I was a mean, junkyard dog. He was always loving on me. And I'm sure he was just like that night. When I was messing up, he still had a smile on his face because the Lord can see the love that he put in you. And that's what he looks for. That's what he looks for. That's what he looks at. He doesn't look at us through the eyes and the lenses of criticism or critical judgment. He looks through the eyes of love. And when you look through the eyes of love, the love in you even comes out. Once you see their love, it pulls love out of you, and you start wanting to love them even more. And I read this, several times in 1 Corinthians 4, where it says, love suffers long and it is kind. I look at all these dimensions of what happened that night with this guy, because I was really loving him. I wasn't trying to do a Christianese type love, because I was a Christian. I can't do that. I have to be myself. What you get is what you see is what you get. And I know that even though I suffered long with that guy and suffered the shame and suffered the criticism, I was more focused on this love that I had for him and seeing the love that he was bringing to me. I couldn't even really hear, and be offended at all the cussing and all the cursing that he was doing to me, because I could feel out of that stuff he was still loving me. And I got to maybe just taste a little bit of how the Lord looks at us and how the Lord can hear things in us that we can't hear. There's people out there that probably think that they're terrible and they're trying to love the best that they can. And the Lord's excited about that. He's excited about how you're loving it, and at least you're trying. And that's one thing that I know this guy was doing. He was trying to love, but that was the only way he knew how to love, is just to give you a hard time. And those that recognized it, which evidently nobody recognized it at the time, except maybe the Lord and me, I guess. And when that happened, it really brought hope into this man. It was like, it made him feel like he was okay. Even though he was a rough guy, he finally met somebody that could see him, And I believe the Lord wants that with us. He wants a people that can really see people, that can really see them through the eyes of love and really see the love that they're really carrying. Because every one of us have an incorruptible seed inside, and it's called the love of God. And if you love that part of that person, it will cause that seed to grow if you'll water it. Most of us, when we start loving people and see that love in other people, we'll find ourselves watering people instead of putting people on a fast. You walk up to a beautiful plant, and if it's dry, you'll want to water it. You'll want to help it. To us, that's kind of natural. But when it comes to human beings, it's like we've been taught by Satan. When they're dry and they're bitter, they look like they're a throwaway. That's the time you've got to water that plant, because we're all those God's plants. We're like trees, and we've got to be those trees that are planted by water and to share our water with others. And if we can water dry, bitter plants that are drying up, I'm sure we can use the water that the Lord's given us to water the world, to water people. I mean, he said if we believe on him, out of our bellies will flow rivers or streams of living water. And where does the living water go? I mean, it can't go to ourselves or we'll back it up. It backs up into a dam. So it has to go out to somebody, has to go out to somebody that's dry. That has to go out to somebody that actually needs it, just like the Lord does with us. And so I'm gonna read this thing one more time because I see all the dimensions, that me and this guy walked through, and I realize, even though to everybody else that was a tough time, and they were embarrassed for me, I thought it was a great time and didn't even recognize some of these, negative things about people. It says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. And I wasn't behaving rudely. It was crazy. I was suffering long. I wasn't being provoked. I was being kind. It was crazy, but I was loving it while I was getting beat up, It does not seek its own. And most of the time, seeking its own, when you're around people, you're hoping that they'll change. That's when you start seeking your own instead of seeking theirs will, their life and what they need. Most of the time when you're looking at somebody critical, you're seeking your own will instead of God's will. You're not seeking after the love of God. You're seeking after your own will, which most of the time is completely wrong. Is not provoked, thinks no evil. And I could not think evil about this guy. It was crazy. And evidently this guy was not thinking evil of me, even though he was cussing and ranting and raving. He told me right off the bat that he liked me when I got out of the truck. But the way he expressed it was completely different than what we've been taught of how we, supposed to express love, because we're all different. We've all grown up in grown up in bad environments. Some of us have grown up in perfect environments. You've never had a scratch on your skin, and but all of us show our love differently. But we've got to be able to look at it differently. We've got to be able to see each other's love differently, just like the Lord does us. Thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, which that was crazy. I got so tickled when he said, I'm going to be at church. I'm a deacon. It was Wednesday night, and I was just laughing because I'd been bearing all this cussing and stuff, and I just busted out laughing when he said, I've got to be at church. And but bearing those things wasn't really a burden, because love was much bigger than, my criticism and trying to, think of woe is me. I can't believe this guy's beating me up. Who cares if somebody beats you up? What really means a lot more is that we love them more than worried about us getting beat up. If you do that, you won't feel the beatings. And I won't even get into that, but that's a lot what the Lord went through during his crucifixion. Love got him through. If you read this again, you can see how he endured the crucifixion as well. His love for us did. But believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Endures all things. Somebody asked me the other day, they go, when is he going to change? And I said, well, love endures all things, But if you've got limits on the things you're enduring, you're really not completely loving. You're putting a limit on your love. And man, that'll really make you cough up a demon. Because I'm going to tell you, some of us, even watching right now, the Lord's enduring your stuff, enduring my stuff. He's doing it every day. He's been doing it for eternity. All of these things that are going on in the world right now, people getting raped right now, people getting killed right now, martyred right now. He's enduring all that pain. And, we think he can't feel it. We think that he can't feel that stuff. He can feel it. Because now we have a high priest that can sympathize with us. And he feels that stuff, so he endures it because he loves us so much. and believes all things, hopes in all things, which reminds me, when he's up there on the cross, enduring the cross for us, he prays not for himself, he prays for us, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Think about that. He's believing that we are good people and that we're controlled, but we're controlled by an evil force. He's believing you're good even while you're criticizing him. He's believing that you're good while you're nailing somebody down and trying to manipulate them and put them in a place to where they're totally ostracized like Jesus was. He still believes in that person that's doing it. And that's the way we've got to be. If we can get to that place where we're more in love with his love for people than our own love, there's no telling what we could do. So that's my story. And of course, the last part of that in verse 8 says, love never fails. And it does not ever fail. Never fails. If you went all the way in love and endured somebody throughout the whole thing, you'd see that love would never fail. But most of the people in this world, we have limits. We have real limits. And then when you cut it off, you got to Christianize it and everything. You got to have excuses for your limit of love for people. And thank God we have a God that has no limits of love for us, lest we'd be in trouble. We really would. This whole world would be in trouble. This world is not even making it without him exuding his glory and his love toward us right now upon this earth. If he would think about how bad we are, or if he'd get a negative opinion about us and criticism, we'd all die because the river would dry up. The river that flows from the throne is flowing out, not in. So in order for the water to keep coming out, he's got to be thinking the right way. He's got to be having the right nature for that stuff to come out. It's like being in love. Man, that's all you can do is give out. It's all you can do is just let the river flow out of you. You never think about keeping it for yourself. That's the way the Lord is. Well, I love you guys, and hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. And I'm still friends with that crazy Hunter. He's an awesome guy. Has a lot of pain in his body from professional sports, and just pray for him. Even though I'm not telling you his name, I'm sure if you prayed for him, the Lord would hear your prayer. So pray for us as well. We keep going after the Lord, and the Lord keeps showing us different things, but we go through the same warfare as you do. We're all on that same level. We're all trying to follow the Lord. We're all trying to learn how to love. So let's give each other grace. And let's try to find that incorruptible seed that's in us. Let's try to find that seed that's been planted in every man. And let's start watering it. Look past your criticism towards someone. It's easy to find negativity because we're geared to that. We're geared to find negativity. But can you imagine if your nature changed where you're geared to find love in someone instead of negativity? That would be awesome. We've got to have that. What we have been having, the way we have been doing it, it's not working. Discernment is finding God and a nature of God in somebody, not finding evil. We were never called to know good and evil. We were called to know God, and we've got to find God in everything, in everybody. And if we can find love in somebody, we found God, and we can water that. And let God deliver them. Let God deliver them from that stuff. Because the more you water, man, that seed of love, it'll start growing like a tree, and it'll push everything out that is not of God. And sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes you've got to endure a long time to see that tree grow. I mean, it's like watching an oak tree grow. Nobody wants to do it. We want to pour Miracle Grow on it. We want to try to make it fast. And God's not like that. He's not like that at all. He enjoys watching it grow slowly. We need that. We've got to get to a point where we enjoy watching each other grow slowly. Because, man, just being there for them and watching them grow is enough. They need that. We all need each other. We all need help growing in this place called love. So, we love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget the old hunter this week. When you meet somebody you think is grumpy, look past the grumpiness and see the love. And then water that. Focus on that area, even though it may not be coming out. Focus on that area and watch how it makes you change, not the other person change. All right. Love you guys. All right. Talk to you later. God bless.